Thank you everyone for joining us today. I am Macy Calvert, a program officer at the Bob Woodruff Foundation and an active duty spouse. We've had a great turnout for this event and we appreciate all of your guys' time and we welcome you all. For those who do not know the Bob Woodruff Foundation, our Got Your Six network is the largest non-governmental network of organizations serving our military and veteran community. The network is made up of veteran-serving organizations of varying sizes, maturity, and focus areas across all 50 states, Puerto Rico, American Samoa, and Guam. We are a thought leader, a funder, and when it's helpful to our community and when we're trying to understand thorny issues, we are a convener. I'm really excited to introduce our moderator. We have Sean Liu, who is the Director of Communications for the VHA Homeless Programs Office, where they are responsible for developing strategic communications that enhance efforts to prevent and end homelessness among veterans and their families. They are also the host of Ending Veteran Homelessness, a monthly podcast that offers a demystified and accessible look into our nationwide efforts to help veterans experiencing and at risk of homelessness. I'm going to share that link with you all, and then I'm going to share some other resources mentioned in this presentation today while our team is speaking. Thanks, Sean. You can take it away.
Hello, everybody. We're really excited to be here with you today to talk about housing solutions provided by the Department of Veterans Affairs to help veterans who are experiencing or at risk of homelessness. It's my privilege and honor to introduce my colleagues and the presenters, the actual subject matter experts who will be taking us through today's webinar. First up, we have Ms. Jill Albanese. She is the Director of Clinical Operations and the Senior Advisor to the Executive Director here in the Homeless Programs Office. As Director of Clinical Operations, Ms. Albanese is responsible for operationalizing the HPO strategic plan, which we'll touch on lightly a little bit later today, as well as developing action steps to propel the department's mission of ending veteran homelessness forward. Today, she's joined by Anthony Love, Principal Advisor and Director of Community Engagement in the VHA Homeless Programs Office. Mr. Love provides strategic advice and counsel to the Executive Director on intra and inter-agency initiatives, as well as build community relationships that help veterans exit to homelessness. And rounding us out is Masaki Hirayama. She's a health system specialist also here in the Homeless Programs Office. In her current role, she serves as the office's expert on legislation impacting homeless veterans, which we're also going to talk about today. All right, that is our team of experts. With that in mind, we're going to go ahead and go on to the next slide. And I'm just going to guide us through our agenda, and then I'm going to turn it over to my dear friend and colleague, Jill. First off, we're going to start off with some introductory concepts, just some nouns and verbs to help level set about what we mean when we talk about veteran homelessness. Then Jill's going to provide some progress towards ending veteran homelessness, how we're doing in our work and where we're headed. Jill's also going to give you a kind of a briefing on a big initiative of ours last year. It was our 2023 permanent housing and homelessness goal. She's going to give you a progress update on the work that happened last year. And then Jill's going to round us out with some a high-level overview of the standard homelessness assistance resources that VA has for veterans experiencing homelessness and housing instability. After that, Masaki is going to tell us about the post-COVID landscape, acknowledging that we're kind of in an endemic stage of the COVID-19 pandemic, but with the end of the public health emergency, where does that leave all of the different flexibilities and authorities that provided greater access for homeless veterans? She's also going to provide some legislative updates. And then before we get to your questions, Anthony is going to provide some opportunities on how you, depending on where you are in the country, what your role is, what your day job is, how you can help us in our work to end veteran homelessness, and a couple opportunities for you to stay connected and engage with us. And then we'll talk about some Q&A. All right. With that in mind, it is my privilege to turn it over to my friend and colleague, Jill Albanese, to continue our presentation, starting with some introductory concepts level setting on veteran homelessness. Jill, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, as Sean mentioned, we're going to do a bit of level setting here, starting with just a few definitions or nouns and verbs, as Sean said. Okay, so let's start with the definition of homelessness. And for the most part, the VA uses the federal definition of homelessness, which is the same definition that our friends at Housing and Urban Development use. And so when we talk about someone who is homeless, we're really talking about someone who lacks a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence. And that means we're talking about folks who are living in emergency shelters, folks who are living in transitional housing, or folks who are living in places not meant for habitation. These are folks who might be living in encampments, folks who might be living in cars, folks that might be living in abandoned buildings. We also consider folks homeless if they are at imminent risk of losing their primary nighttime residence. We're talking about imminent risk and imminent loss, meaning that folks would be within 14 days of losing their permanent housing. We see a lot of folks in this category that may be staying with family and friends and that they're just not able to stay there. So maybe they're not homeless right now, but they're certainly at imminent risk of homelessness. This category also includes folks who may have their own rental housing, but they're just not going to be able to stay there, and they've maybe received an eviction notice and have to be out within 14 days and just don't have the resources to be able to get another permanent place to live. We also look at and consider folks homeless if they are a family or an unaccompanied youth under 25 years of age that qualify under other federal statutes. So, for example, the Department of Education has a little bit of a different definition of homelessness than VA and HUD, but we still consider folks who are considered homeless under that Department of Education, for example, definition. We will still consider those folks, and those folks would still be eligible for services and considered homeless under the VA. We also, in addition, include folks who are either fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence. And again, those are folks who just don't have other options and are going to have a really difficult time securing housing. Or if they do become homeless, they're just going to have such a tough time getting rehoused. So let's talk a bit about the definition of veteran. So for the purposes of VA, homeless programs specifically, we consider veterans folks who are adults who have served on active duty in the armed forces. This also includes folks who served on active duty from the reserves or the guard. We don't have time limits for this either. So if they served active duty, even if it was for one day, they are eligible under homeless programs. I think it's important to note too that this is a broader definition of veteran than what is included, what is defined for purposes of healthcare eligibility and certain other VA benefits. We've done that intentionally. We really want to have that flexibility so that we can serve as many folks as possible. So when talking about homelessness, we always think that it's important for us to talk through some of the risk factors. And when we look at homelessness among veterans, we kind of categorize a couple of different types of risk factors. Those include, as you see here, individual level factors, and those are things like substance use disorders, lack of income or employment, history of incarceration, lack of social support, and even adverse childhood events. We have found in our research that those individual level factors can contribute to homelessness. And we just see that in our homeless population. I think it's important to note too that what we see sometimes is that while we do have folks who may have some of these characteristics and factors in our existing homeless population, what's not always clear is, do these actually cause homelessness, or is this just a population that has these risk factors, which may have even happened after folks became homeless? We also look at system level factors. And I think when we look closely at some of the literature and research, we see that these are things that are very, very prevalent. And we see these system level factors. The reason that we know there are issues is because we see in places where there is high rent costs and low vacancy rates, we see more folks who are homeless in those areas. And so we really know that these system level factors have a huge impact on homelessness. And those are things like lack of affordable housing that I mentioned, lack of economic opportunities. We even see neighborhood factors. And I know there has been some talk about certain zip codes. We may see a higher prevalence of risk of homelessness. Also, cultural factors do play a piece in this as well. So when looking at the risk factor profiles, we have this categorized in kind of 4 different areas. And we look at, when we're looking at our population that we serve in the VA, we look at folks who have relatively few problems. That's a subset of our folks that we're serving. We also look at folks, we do see folks that have substance use disorders and a mental health condition, which we sometimes call a co-occurring situations with our veterans. We also do see folks who have these substance use disorders, history of incarceration, and also just long time history of poverty. That's also a segment of risk factors that we're looking at and seeing within our veteran population. Also, there are folks who have a disabling medical condition, and that certainly can contribute to someone um, uh, losing housing and not being able to get rehoused quickly if they do become homeless. So we do look at these as risk factors as well. So I'm really excited to show the next couple of slides, and we can go ahead and go on to the next slide, because this, I think, is our favorite slide in VA. This slide just gives you this fantastic visual of the progress that we have made in toward ending homelessness among veterans. And you can see here that this starts actually in 2010, and since 2010, we have basically cut homelessness among veterans in half. Um, the orange line here is, of course, the decrease in homelessness among all veterans since 2010. So starting with, a little over 74,000 in 2010 down to 35,574, which we know is still way too many veterans experiencing homelessness, but it is a great deal of progress that we have made. Now, the middle line, I just want to call your attention to. This middle line represents the numbers of sheltered homeless. So these are the folks that I mentioned before who may be living in transitional housing. They may be living in emergency shelters. And then this blue line down here, this is the number of veterans experiencing unsheltered homelessness. And when we talk about unsheltered homelessness, as I mentioned before, these are a very vulnerable segment of our homeless veteran population. These are the folks who may be living on the streets, folks living in encampments, folks living in their cars. So this, unfortunately, we did see a bit of an uptick in this between 2022 and 2023. So it is an area that we're very focused on, and it's a priority population for our office, obviously, as I mentioned, because they are so vulnerable and because the numbers did go up slightly. I'm going to talk about our goals for the prior calendar year, 2023. We at VA, under leadership of our Secretary Dennis McDonough and our Executive Director Monica Diaz, we have set some pretty ambitious goals for ourselves and pretty ambitious targets. Last year, we set a goal to house at least 38,000 veterans. This was a similar goal that we had the previous calendar year. It was actually the same target the previous calendar year. And when we talk about housing folks, I want to just point out that these are folks who will be permanently housed. So this wasn't moving folks from unsheltered situations into transitional housing. This was getting folks permanently housed, folks moved into apartments, signing a lease, and really ending their homelessness permanently. The second goal was to prevent returns to homelessness. So we didn't want to house 38,000 veterans only to have folks falling back into homelessness and losing their housing. So we wanted to ensure that 95% of the veterans that we did house during the calendar year stayed in housing. We also do recognize, though, we're realistic, and we know that there are folks who will fall back into homelessness. And again, that 5% that does fall back into homelessness, we wanted to make sure that we weren't just saying, well, that's a 5% loss, that's too bad. We were diligent in making sure that of those folks who did lose their housing during the calendar year, that at least 90% of those veterans who returned to homelessness were either rehoused or back on a path to permanent rehousing by the end of the calendar year. So again, these are pretty ambitious goals. We also set a goal, as I mentioned, that for that priority population of unsheltered veterans. So we set a goal to engage with at least 28,000 unsheltered veterans in the calendar year. And when I say engage with, I think it's also, it's really important to point out that this is not just going out, doing outreach and just kind of touching base with folks. When we're talking about engagement, it's really doing an intake, doing an assessment So as you can imagine, and anybody that's worked in homeless services, you know that it takes a long time to build trust to the point where you're going to be able to get to do an assessment on somebody. So this was not just an outreach target, this was really an engagement with the unsheltered population target. So this is the progress that we made. This was where we ended up at the end of the calendar year. And so I love to say this, we crushed it. And this really speaks to all of the work that happened at the medical centers and with our grantee partners, community partners. I mean, this is just was just such a huge accomplishment and a real team effort. So for the first goal, we actually housed over 46,000 veterans, and these were permanent housing situations, and again, representing 122.5% of the goal. For goal 2, we again crushed it. We exceeded the goal. So almost 96% of the veterans that we housed are still in housing, and we're still in housing at the end of the calendar year. So of the veterans that did return to homelessness, and there were almost 2,000 folks who did return to homelessness, at 1,850 of those folks have either been rehoused or placed on a path to rehousing. So 96% of the veterans who returned to homeless are actually back on a path to permanent housing. So again, just great results. We're super happy with them. And again, just really grateful to all of the work that the medical centers and their community partners did. The third goal, again, the unsheltered veteran target. You remember that our target was 28,000. We actually engaged with 40,000 unsheltered veterans. So we really just did outreach all the time. And it was just so great to see the work. My colleague who is here right now, Masaki Hirayama, actually spearheaded a couple of surge events to just get folks engaged and back into transitional housing. So there've been some really ambitious efforts here. Okay, let's talk about the assistance and resources available through the VA. Okay, so you can see here, this diagram just really shows our system. So we have really a full continuum of services within the VA homeless program. We've got services for folks who are needing prevention services. So those folks who may be at imminent risk of homelessness, still may be living in their own apartment or staying with family and friends, but just at risk and almost about to be homeless. We do have prevention services that we can provide to that category of folks. We also do a lot of outreach through our program. So we do outreach to places where folks are staying, including encampments. Also, we do outreach through jails and prisons, to jails and prisons rather. And we have a specialized program that provides services to folks who are either currently incarcerated, have a history of incarceration, or maybe just are involved in the court system. That's a huge risk factor for homelessness, as you all saw from the previous slides. And so it's really important that we have those specialized services for those folks to make sure that they're not falling back into that homeless system. We also have temporary housing. So when we are able to engage with folks who maybe are staying unsheltered or just need a place to go immediately, we have a couple of options for folks. We have temporary housing services through a couple of our programs, and I'm going to go into that in more detail in just a minute. We also have permanent housing options. So as I mentioned, we got over 46,000 folks into permanent housing. We did that in a variety of ways, and we have some specialized programs that can actually help folks obtain housing and maintain their permanent housing. Okay, so I said I was going to talk a bit more about the programs, and so I'm not going to go into this in great detail, but just want to highlight a few of these areas. As I mentioned, we have homeless prevention services through our Supportive Services for Veteran Families program. This program is a partnership between the VA and typically nonprofit organizations in the community. So VA provides funding. We have some amazing community partners who are, we call them SSVF grantees. Those folks actually provide the financial assistance and case management needed for folks who may need support in keeping their existing housing. We also have, as I mentioned earlier, these outreach, engagement, assessment, and referral services. We have a few programs that do this. This is done through our Healthcare for Homeless Veterans outreach program. These folks who work in this outreach program are the VA staff who actually go out there to the encampments will go out to the safe parking sites or to where folks may be camped in cars. They do a lot of outreach to existing shelters that may not be VA run, but maybe community shelters. So these folks do just a ton of work and do a great job at outreach, as you saw from the results of our calendar year goals. We also have community resource and referral centers. These are centers that are specifically designed to be almost like drop-in centers for our homeless veterans. These are sometimes near the VA, sometimes they're not near the VA. Sometimes we have found that it's better to have these resource and referral centers in maybe a downtown core of a city. It's just easier for folks to access sometimes than it is for them to get to the VA. So we do have a number of these referral centers where folks can go. We have our national call center for homeless veterans, and we've got a number that we'll provide on a next slide coming up here. But this is a call center where folks who can who are at risk of homelessness or folks who are homeless can call this call center, and we've got 24/7 help that can connect them with a VA, a local VA medical center that can help out if somebody's at risk of homelessness or is experiencing homelessness. We also get a lot of folks calling this call center on behalf of somebody else who they know is a veteran and is homeless. And we're happy to take those too. We answer every single one of these calls, and we follow up on every single one of these calls that comes into our office. As I mentioned, we've got services for justice-involved veterans. We've got our VJO program, which helps with veterans who are in jails and also folks who are involved in the court system. And then our healthcare for reentry veterans is actually a program that helps folks who are incarcerated in a prison, which is typically folks are what we do in this program is we typically try to prevent folks from becoming homeless when they're no longer incarcerated. Again, it's a huge risk factor. So we're wanting to make sure that we make those connections with veterans while they're still incarcerated so that they have a landing spot and have a place to go when they're no longer incarcerated and they don't end up on the streets. We have residential services, as I've mentioned before, our HCHV contract residential services and our HCHV low demand safe haven services. These are contracts with community providers that basically provide more or less emergency shelter services for our veterans. So these are places where we can immediately place someone that has a need and has lost their housing. Our grant and per diem program is a transitional housing program. It's a little bit of a longer term program typically than our residential services or safe havens. So folks can either self-refer or we can refer folks typically to these grant per diem transitional housing programs. Most folks don't stay this long, but veterans for the most part can stay in grant per diem for up to 2 years. Then we have our permanent housing services. As I mentioned, we've got a couple of lanes for permanent housing. We have our Housing and Urban Development VA Supportive Housing Program. That's a partnership, as you can see here, with HUD. HUD provides us with Section 8 vouchers, and VA provides supportive services to the veterans who get those vouchers. This is a program that is typically reserved for our higher need veterans who really need that long-term supportive housing, folks that really need the long-term case management and will need that voucher to help support rental payments long-term indefinitely. It is a long-term permanent program, so once somebody gets that Section 8 voucher, they have that as long as is needed. Our supportive services for veteran families program, SSVF. This is also a permanent housing program. It's considered a rapid rehousing program. Veterans typically can receive rental assistance for up to 9 months if they're extremely low income, and typically for 6 months if they're considered just low income. By low income, we're able to serve veterans who are up to 80% of area median income. So we can serve quite a few folks under this program. Just a reminder, this is also our program that supports prevention services. And then we have some specialty services. We've got community employment services. We have a patient-aligned care team. So that's really a healthcare clinic that is specifically for our veterans who are experiencing homelessness. We don't have these in every single medical center. I wish so much that we did. but we have these in quite a few of our medical centers, especially our larger ones. So this is just a really important program and part of our continuum. And then we have legal services for veterans. This program helps folks who are maybe at risk of eviction, maybe if they just need some legal services to help them maintain their housing or obtain housing. I mean, some of the things that legal services can help with, for example, are simple things like getting birth certificates or driver's licenses, or getting child support payments reduced, for example, or getting child support payments if that's needed. So it's a relatively new program, the legal services program, but it's really successful and it's expanding. So we're happy to have it as part of our service package. Okay, I do want folks to check out our strategic plan. It is amazing. If you want to know what we're up to, what our priorities are, and really what our action steps are going to be to reach our goals, I encourage you all to look at our strategic plan. It's got a lot of great information in there. It has a lot of background on our programs, talks about each of the programs. So it's really good. And I think the link is here. Yep, it looks like there is a link in the slides. So fantastic. I think Sean did that. Okay, so this is just a little bit of a preview of what's in the strategic plan. We have, as you can see here, 7 objectives. And again, I think our office is just very ambitious, and we like to set a lot of goals, objectives, and action steps to meet our mission and vision. But you know, it's a very complex issue, homelessness, and so we do have a lot of areas that we're focused on at VA. And I'm not going to go over these because I'm hoping everybody's actually going to go to the strategic plan, but I want to highlight here just some of these. First of all, the objective 1, which is to increase access to affordable permanent housing options. This is absolutely critical and crucial. And while we at VA don't have the authority to build housing per se, we do have the ability to partner with our folks at Housing and Urban Development. We partner with a lot of state agencies that build housing. We do have programs that can provide housing assistance, financial assistance to keep folks in housing and to pay rent. So what we really look at with this is not necessarily building housing, but just making the resources that we have that can help folks stay in housing or afford housing. We just want to increase more access to that for those folks. Okay, I am now going to turn it over to my friend and colleague, Masaki Hariyama.
Hello, everyone. I'm really excited to be here to discuss the temporary flexibilities that VA was granted during the COVID-19 pandemic, current bills that are proposing to extend those flexibilities, and current legislation that provides services for homeless veterans. So let's go back 4 years for a second to the year 2020. When COVID-19 was declared a public health emergency. To respond to the rapidly changing landscape, Congress passed a series of laws that gave federal agencies temporary authorizations. For VA homeless programs, the laws were CARES Act, American Rescue Plan, and then the Isaacson-Roe Act. And these laws gave us unprecedented flexibility to waive or modify certain requirements, which infused our homeless programs with much needed resources. And if you remember one thing, it's that these temporary authorizations were directly tied to the COVID-19 public health emergency. So they also sunsetted on May 11th, 2023, when the public health emergency was declared over. This slide is a high-level summary of the temporary flexibilities VA was granted to rapidly pivot and respond to homeless veterans' needs during the pandemic. First was the flexible assistance that allowed VA staff to purchase life-saving goods and services for veterans who are homeless, at risk of homelessness, or in HUD-VASH. These included services like deep cleaning, pest remediation, moving and storage fees, landlord incentives, payment of rental and utilities in arrears, and life-saving goods like generators, AC units, clothing, and move-in kits. The next was rideshare services, and this allowed VA staff and veterans served through our homeless programs to order real-time transportation services
through Lyft and Uber and other companies. And the majority of these rides were for medical appointments, and other rides were for job interviews, apartment searches, and court hearings. And having access to real-time transportation without needing to rely on the availability of staff or vehicle was so instrumental and key in getting veterans the services they needed to get housed or remained housed. The third temporary authorization allowed VA to raise the per diem rate of grant and per diem transitional housing programs, which is currently capped at 115% of the state domiciliary rate. The increase in per diem rates allowed grantees to hire more skilled staff, purchase personal protective equipment like hand sanitizers and gloves. And then it also allowed them to address infrastructure improvements like decongregating settings to make more personalized rooms, and then other safety and service needs that were needed during the pandemic. And the fourth flexibility removed the assistance limits that were provided through SSVF. And this was very pivotal in preventing homelessness as well as rapidly housing our unhoused veterans. Again, these were temporary flexibilities that expired on May 11th, 2023. So VA has not been able to use or provide these services since. So recognizing how these flexibilities were game-changing for VA homeless programs, a few bills have proposed to extend some of these temporary authorizations in different forms. These are the Home Act of 2023, Healthy Foundations, and the Charge Act. Each bill proposes a different iteration of the temporary authorizations VA had during the public health emergencies. And when you get the slide deck, you can click on each bill if you're curious and you want to see what each of them looks like. Okay, shifting gears, this last slide summarizes 4 sections of the Joseph Maxwell Cleland and Robert Joseph Dole Memorial Veterans Benefits and Healthcare Improvement Act of 2022. This was passed at the end of 2022, and it's a really large bill, a law that was passed. And I just wanted to highlight 4 sections within Division U that directly impact homeless veterans. Section 164 addresses aging homeless veterans and their access to supportive services. Section 301 temporarily removes the matching requirement for grant and per diem capital grants, so grantees can make improvements to their facilities without immediate concerns about matching their grant award. Section 310 authorized 5 pilot sites to combine transitional housing with medical staff, which could benefit aging and disabled veterans. And then Section 311 authorized 5 pilot sites to provide substance use treatment in transitional housing sites. So we at VA, we've been actively working with our partners within VA and the communities to get these started. We've been really excited to have these laws passed for us. And next, I'll turn it over to my colleague and friend, Anthony.
Thank you so much, Masaki. Good afternoon, everyone. So you've heard all the things that VA's Homeless Program Office is doing and how we're working very hard to help veterans to exit homelessness. But now I want to talk to you about how you can help, because we can't do this alone. So just to offer a bit of advice for those that are pretty much supporting veterans who are experiencing homelessness, and a number of you are working with those veterans, we always ask to be patient, because that veteran may not have had their basic needs met that day, or they may be going through something like all of us are. And so just asking for a little grace and patience as you encounter those veterans as they are going through some things. And you also we ask that you understand that they may not have reliable means of communication or a physical address to provide. So we just ask that you work with them and do what you can for those that are helping those veterans. And as well as, be encouraging and instill hope, but never overpromise. Don't promise what you can't deliver, but you can still encourage and instill hope in those veterans who are going through that journey of exiting homelessness. So at this particular slide, I just tell you to take out your smartphones. If you have C student phones, there will be a link for you to click on when you get to a laptop. But all you have to do is hold your phone, put it on your camera app, hold it up to the QR code, and you should have a little yellow browser that you can click on, and it will take you to our website. And you will have an opportunity to see the resources and some of those that I will cover in some of our other slides. So as I said, the QR code would have taken you to our website. For those who need to go physically, that site is va.gov/homeless. And it'll offer you the opportunity to go at your own pace to get involved and learn more about what we're doing in the realms of not only housing and employment, but also in community collaborations and what other services are there that can help veterans. If the website's not your thing and you just want to reach out to someone, you can go to, send an email to homelessvets@va.gov, and you should get a response within 24 to 48 hours ish to respond to your email, but you will get a response and we can help you with whatever question that you may have. Also, you heard Jill talk about our National Call Center for Homeless Veterans. This is a 24/7 hotline that the veteran, him or herself, who's homeless or at risk can call, or their family members or their friends or people who are just supporters of those veterans who are experiencing homelessness or at risk of homelessness. You can make that call and chat with a trained individual who would be ready to talk and can talk confidentially to you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, letting you know where the nearest VA medical center is, or in some instances where some resources that would be available to help that veteran with what she or he may be experiencing at that time as they're trying not to become homeless or they're trying to exit homelessness. And then there are some other opportunities in terms of making an impact, how you can really help us. Anything from if you are someone who can provide training or know of training, as our veterans who are exiting homelessness may need to enhance their skills to be competitive in the marketplace, or to just kind of adapt to the new ways that things happen, and you have that skill, you can help in that way to help provide training. Veterans who are exiting homelessness, getting into the housing and the supports, that's just the beginning. They need a place to sit, need a place to sleep. So not every apartment comes with furniture. So furnishings are a very helpful and comforting tools to have for that veteran to make their house a home, as well as having move-in essentials like knives and forks and spoons and plates and towels and toiletries and just some of the things that we take for granted really come in handy for those individuals who are beginning to start a next phase of their life. And other basics like food and to make sure that they can have a nutrition for their bodies, and where they're getting back to work, transportation, whether it be public transportation or you know of an entity that provides that type of support. And then other things like housing assistance, help with rent and deposits and so forth, employment, helping with stable income, and then just increasing access. And then if you want to just physically get engaged or whatever, you can go to your local medical center and connect with the VA Center for Development and Civic Engagement, the office formerly known as Voluntary Services, where you can lend your skills and help and volunteer in a way that you can be hands-on in helping those veterans that would need that support. And then some of you have heard of stand downs, but for those who haven't, these are events that are held in communities across the country. They range in length from 1 day to 3 days, where you have VA staff and volunteers and local service providers in those communities, where they're there to help those veterans who are homeless, get access to food and clothing, their healthcare screenings. It can range from also having barbers on site to help, with haircut, because of course, if you look good and you feel good, you can do good. They also, some of these stand downs have legal services, have employers. They also are connecting those veterans with referrals for healthcare and housing, employment, and all the like. And also on our website, you can click on the link to identify where the upcoming stand downs are located, particularly for those in your community. And then landlords, people who have property that you're looking for tenants. You have a very unique opportunity because the way that we end homelessness is to make sure folks have a place to live. And we have veterans who have support and resources through our voucher program and also through our SSVF program that my colleague Jill Albanese talked about. So if you are a landlord, we would encourage you to work with us. There's a lot of benefits to renting to veterans. Look, these veterans who are exiting homelessness with these resources, that's reliable income. Who doesn't like reliable income? And you also have these veterans coming with support from the VA. Some of you have tenants right now that you wish they had case managers. Well, these veterans come with case managers and they come with that support to kind of help you in the event that any issues will arise. Not saying that they will, but you have that safety blanket. And it also gives you the opportunity to feel good about serving those who served. And if you are interested in helping those homeless veterans, again, you can shoot us an email at homelessvets@va.gov. And also on our website, it tells you also how you can become involved. Our veterans need jobs. It's not enough for them to get into housing and so forth, but they also need a way to earn income. And our ideal is not for them just to become housed and stable, but to also work on their personal goals and try to improve their quality of life and to keep improving their quality of life. And so steady employment is really a critical factor and a protective factor against homelessness. So once that person exits homelessness, having employment is a protective factor to keep them housed. And we also, you can work with us in that. We have community employment coordinators at medical centers across the country. These individuals help veterans prepare for interviews. They help them connect them to employers. They help them to translate the skills they learned in the military to civilian life. And they're just a wonderful resource. There's a link where you can identify who your local community employment coordinator is at your medical center. I will encourage you to look that up if you are an employer and work with those employment coordinators to help veterans become employed. And then just real quick, telling you how you can stay engaged and connected up to us because we like you and we hope you like us. So you heard about, when you go to our website, you'll see an opportunity to subscribe to our homeless newsletter. It comes out monthly and it provides you with news and information about what's happening at the VA and also talks about stories on ongoing efforts to help prevent and end homelessness. It is on our website, va.gov/homeless. So, go there, make sure you sign up for it. And I tell you, it's better than the New York Times. And then you also heard about our podcast, Ending Veteran Homelessness. Again, it's out monthly on every platform where you get your podcast. And our host, Sean Liu, does a fantastic job of bringing a diverse set of guests on that show to really talk about some of the intricate issues and areas where we're working to end veteran homelessness and the challenges that veterans face, and also how you can become involved. So check out that podcast, put it in your library, subscribe today, and look forward to it.
Thanks so much, Anthony. Okay, in the time remaining, we've got some questions that you've been asking in the Q&A that we're going to get to now. I'm going to drop the slide deck. And so I don't know that we have enough time for all of them, but we're going to get to at least a couple. Anthony, for this first set of questions, I want to come to you, and it has to deal with state collaboration with VA. And as our main lead for inter and intra-agency partnership, this is great for you. The second one I'm actually going to answer for myself. What states are making great strides at the state level in coordination and organization? And a couple that I want to just really shout out are Minnesota and Colorado, who are just doing some amazing work statewide with coordination. Their State Department of Veterans Affairs have really been taking the lead on getting all of the different communities in their geography working on the same picture. Minnesota is also doing some really interesting stuff, ending homelessness community by community, and are working to get 100% of their state on board. I know many other states as well. Historically, states like Virginia, Connecticut, and Delaware have achieved an effective end to veteran homelessness. But Anthony, can you share a little bit from your perspective? What are some of the easiest ways or most impactful ways that state agencies can coordinate with VA on this work?
Sure. Every state has a State Department of Veterans Affairs who generally have a relationship with local VAs. And also some states have what we call interagency councils on homelessness. I know California has one, and there are other states as well who have these interagencies, so you can connect with VA. We also have within your area network homeless coordinators who they have what we call regions. We call them VISNs, but they're regions. And you can connect with that network homeless coordinator as a way to engage with VA on the state level.
Great. Thank you so much. I think we got time for maybe one or two more questions. Jill, I'd love to come over to you for this next one. This is a question about basically working directly with veterans. The question asker is focused on a veteran who actually applied for a state housing voucher, but is experiencing difficulties anywhere with that process. And so wondering if they can come to VA support. But I'd love to generalize this question about if there's a community organization out there that working with a veteran with any kind of housing problem, what's the best way to get connected to VA for coordination and help?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that certainly anybody could contact us through our hotline. So I would encourage you to reach out there because you will get connected with a local VA homeless program through that hotline. So if you're needing to talk to someone, you're struggling with being able to get a voucher, no matter whether it's VA or state or county, whatever it is, we can still help with that. So we do have case managers that can assist with those types of things. So I would encourage you to just go ahead and reach out to your VA medical center. If you're not already connected, you can connect through the hotline, and that would be a quick way.
Excellent. Got one more question, and Jill, I want to give you this last one, and it's a question about our HUD-VASH program, which, as you mentioned earlier, provides some of those housing vouchers to veterans who are homeless and pairs it up with a lot of supportive services. The question is, how does HUD-VASH work with landlords in accommodating specific needs that the veterans may have, whether they be mobility limits, support pets, or other things that might fall under like reasonable accommodations for disabilities?
Yeah, it's part of what our case managers do. So our case managers are experts in figuring out how to overcome barriers, whether that's trying to find housing that will accommodate your whether it's a pet or a service animal, and they'll look for other ways to overcome certain challenges. But that is really what the case managers do. They're able to connect with providers or provide themselves those reasonable accommodations. So that's something that the HUD-VASH case managers are really good at and can help veterans with.
Outstanding. Thank you so much. I think that was just about as much time as we have for questions. I know there were a couple of other questions that we haven't had a chance to do. Macy, I'm about to turn it back over to you, but Jill Albanese, Anthony Love, Masaki Hirayama from the Homeless Programs Office, really appreciate you joining us all today for this wonderful webinar and all of the information that you shared.
Thank you to our panelists again and all those who attended the webinar today to understand more about this important topic. We'll be sending out an email with the link to this recording and some of the resources mentioned. We'll have direct links to that and some follow-up answers to those questions we didn't get to. Please share with your colleagues and anyone who you know who might benefit from this information. And thank you everyone for your time. Thank you to our HBO team and have a wonderful rest of your week.